Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Workplaces That Work conversation. I am excited to be here today with Dr. Julie Pham of CuriosityBased. And I would have her introduce herself in a minute, but I wanted to also give a little bit of context about the choice of this topic and this conversation and why it's relevant. So if you're new to these, my name is Dr. Lola Adeyemo. I'm the founder and CEO of EQI Mindset, Equity and Inclusion Mindset. And I focus on workplace strategy, talent development. I'm niched an employee resource group strategy, but I also do a lot of workshops and trainings for staff teams, frontline leaders, people managers around inclusivity and tying it to business goals. So I do a lot of work with ERGs and staff teams across education and nonprofit spaces. So great to be here. I started hosting the Workplaces That Work 2 years ago, and it was called ERG Resource Sessions. And it was really centered around bringing a lot of tools and resources to the people that care about ERGs. And I say the people that care because it's not just the ERG leader, is the person that manages the ERG program, is the executive sponsor, people that care about inclusivity and the programs that are happening in the workplace. And so this year, 2026, I rebranded it as Workplaces That Work because it's the same conversations. We just want to really capture the depth of the topics that we cover here. I sit down with experts, founders, consultants, nonprofit leaders around niched topics that they have experience in, they have expertise in, and they share from that place of learning with the people that really care about doing the work within organizations. So today, we're going to be talking about respect, and you will know why in a minute because Dr. Julie is the perfect person to have this conversation with. So respect is one of the most talked about values in the workplace. It shows up in different things. We talk about it in our mission statement, we talk about it in leadership, but then what does it look like to actually practice it? And I listened to Dr. Julie Pham's TED Talk about these a while back too, and I will drop the link as we continue our conversation because I love how it was really broken down. It's not just saying these words; it's how a lot of people have good intent, but how is it interpreted and how is it executed? So in today's workplace, we have a lot of teams that are diverse, distributed, dynamic, multi-generational. It's not just a value anymore; it's a skill. And it's also a signal. So today's conversation is not just why it matters, we'll talk about that, but it's also how. How do we embed it? What does it look like to build it into our systems, into our structures? And so, welcome, Dr. Julie, and thank you for joining me today.
Dr. Lola, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
All right. So let us meet you. Do you want to take a minute to introduce yourself? Tell us about who you are and the work that you do.
Yes. So I'm the founder and CEO of CuriosityBased. We help people practice curiosity in the world, starting in the workplace, because that is where we spend most of our waking hours. So do a lot of workshops, trainings, retreat with organizations, with what I call learning organizations. And what I mean by learning organization is they are organizations, employers that realize they have to invest and grow their employees because things are changing all the time and they need to make time for that. And so that means government, that means nonprofits, more actually companies that focus on that relationship building, the services industries, not ones that are just, hey, we can attract the best talent because we pay top dollar and they're expendable and there's a transaction. It's more, no, we want people to grow here. And that means that we've got to put time in learning from one another.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for the work you do. So let's set the frame a little bit. What does respect actually look like at work? And maybe share a little bit about, that word in the context of the work you do and some of the research that you've done. What does it mean and why do you believe it's often misunderstood?
Well, you just asked, what does it look like? It looks like different things to different people. So I have a book called 7 Forms of Respect. And Dr. Lola, are you familiar with the 5 love languages?
Yes.
Yes. So think of it as the respect version of the 5 love languages, and not 7 habits of highly effective people. When people hear the title 7 forms of respect, sometimes they think, oh, you're going to tell me all the different
Oh,
ways I
okay.
need to be respectful. And I actually say, no,
Mm-hmm.
it's actually about what are your forms of respect? These are my forms of respect.
Right.
So at the core of 7 forms of respect of this framework of my work is curiosity. And so we can agree on how respect feels, to feel seen, heard, acknowledged. What we disagree about is, what does it look like? What does it look like? So, Dr. Lola, for some people, feeling respected means being CC'd on all emails, because that means that they feel included. They get transparency. And for other people, please do not CC me on this email unless you need me to do something. I do not need to be included, right? For some people, it means, hey, I want everyone to come prepared for this meeting. I want you to read the agenda. I want you to read all the prep materials. And if you don't do that, I feel disrespected. And for other people, it's just, hey, I know you're all busy. We'll just talk about it when we get there, and no set work. And so it can look different for different people. And that's where the rub is. So people
Mm-hmm.
talk about respect right now. They talk about it in terms of respect versus disrespect. So it's this black or white thing. If I'm not getting respect the way I want, then I'm being disrespected, or not at least getting respect. And so
Right.
even we talk about it as if it's something that we can, as if there are levels, more respected, less respected. And I actually want to change the conversation. So we talk about, let's assume that we want to respect each other, and we just have different ways of doing it, and we're clashing because of that. And because we need to slow down and get curious
Mm-hmm.
about what does it mean. And that means also I have to know what it means to me.
Right.
I have to actually have that self-awareness.
Yeah. And thank you for saying that too, because well, first, as we were talking, I find myself trying to figure out what kind of person am I. I was like, wait,
Yes. Right.
proceed, right? I want to know what's going on. I know it sounds crazy, but I'm the kind of person that I feel like I want to know. If you CC me, it signals to me that this is an FYI only. If you don't
Mhm.
address it to me, so I think for me, is just make it clear.
Mhm.
Put me on CC, but I want to know. I don't mind the
Yeah.
emails, so I
Yes.
can stay in the
Yes.
loop.
Yes. Right. Oh, and I
Right.
remember working at a tech company when I had to learn, when they said, I want visibility, that meant CC me.
Oh, okay.
Right? What do you mean you want visibility? I don't understand. Oh, you want me to CC you? And so then we would get these
And then,
emails where it's just, oh, and then more people need to have visibility. And so you keep adding them.
yeah,
And that's fine. It's just more about how, instead of saying, hey, we need to respect each other, just like, what does that
yeah.
look like?
What
And
does
then
it look like?
organizations also have to ask, because all of the 7 forms take
Hmm.
work,
Right.
take effort, take changing habits. And so we actually have to be really clear about, is that important and why? What are the consequences if we don't do it?
Right.
Uh, for example, I hear people say, hey, I want information. But do people actually read everything? Do people actually do something with it? We're putting a lot of effort into giving you all this information. And Dr. Lola, how many times have you, well, I wasn't told. Well, go look at that email where you were told.
I
Right?
know. Okay, I'm
We did
feeling
what you
called
said.
out
We did
right
what you
now.
said.
I, I'm
You need
feeling
to do
called
your
out
part
right
too.
now because I was telling you that I'm at a conference this week, and I led a session. I led a
Mhm,
couple of sessions, and there was so much information and emails that
mhm,
came before.
mhm,
I didn't check.
mhm,
I
mhm,
didn't even download the app. I mean, I
mhm,
didn't check
mhm,
the app, and so there were all these things that happened, and they were like, "Did you check your email?" And I'm
mhm,
like, "I actually didn't." So they did what they were supposed to do. They informed me. They had emails. They left voice messages, but I just put it on the calendar and I showed up. But I missed some details that could have, it could have really messed things up. But everything worked out. But I was just
mhm,
thinking about the fact that yes, they put it on, but do we actually check some of these? I want to be CC'd,
mhm,
and so maybe it's learning to separate if there's information that people need to act on. Maybe those are not the CC kind of FYI emails.
mhm,
Maybe those need to actually be like checklist, action
Mhm.
items, right?
Mhm.
Because I've been to conferences where they do more of, they give you a checklist
Mhm.
and they keep you on track to help you
Mhm.
track all the things you need to do by a certain time. So, anyway, we're digressing from respects, but I think this
Yeah.
went
Well, and there's no
well.
perfect way. I just want to point out there's no perfect way to do it,
There is no
right? But there
perfect way to
it
do it.
requires intention. It does
Mhm.
require intention.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I love that you also were clear to kind of establish that, because when I think of the five love languages, it is how I give, how I show, how I receive, right?
Mhm.
How I give, how I receive. So I think that was a great way for you to position this not as a list of 7 things to do to be respectful, more as a, what are your respect signals? How does this person respect the next person? So maybe that kind of flows nicely to the gaps. So
Mhm.
when you think about respect, understanding what respect means and how it means different things to different people, now in the context of the workplace, what are some of the gaps that you see, and the biggest disconnects that people have when it comes to respect, and
Mhm.
how those interpretations kind of show out and maybe cause conflict or
Mhm.
confusion?
So I like to say that respect is relative, dynamic, subjective, and contradictory. Contradictory. Why is it contradictory? Dr. Lola, can you imagine? I mean, do you always do what you say you're going to do? Do you always do what you say you're going to do? I don't. Right? I mean to, I
I
intend
try.
to, right? And that's, I
Sometimes.
try, right? You had a long pause there. And so, and that's,
Yeah, we're
and
all
it's,
human.
we're human, we're human, we're human. And that's why it's contradictory. And so, not to think of respect as these rules that we always follow, but
Mhm,
actually it is contradictory, and it's dynamic. And there are 3 dimensions that explain why it's dynamic. And this is especially true in the workplace. And so the first one is power. It's power
mhm,
dynamics. It's about hierarchy. The way that I want to show respect to my boss is going to be different than to someone who reports to me. The way that I show respect to my customer is going to be different than the way I show respect to my vendor. If I have to make a choice of who I'm going to be late to a meeting with, it'll more likely be my vendor than my
vendor.
customer, and that's just real, right?
Right.
That's real. And then the second dynamic, the second dimension is what I call give versus get. So you kind of alluded to this. The way I like to give respect can differ from the way I like to get respect. And so, for example, think about that person at work who loves to give you unsolicited feedback about how you can do your job better. But when you do that to them, they don't like it. And that could also be you too, right? Maybe you like to give feedback, but you don't like to get it. And maybe it depends on the relationship. I want to get feedback from my boss, but not from my peer. What do they know? Like I'm and so and then the third dimension is what I call, it's the question of what matters to you. What actually
Mhm,
matters to you. And that's different from what should matter to you, because we've
mm,
all been socialized to think, to define respect. I mean, you and I have talked before about growing up bicultural, and so we get different messages of what should matter to us.
mhm,
And so, for example, in Vietnamese culture, honorifics are really important. You would always use them. And
mm.
so, but then I have to ask myself, does that actually matter to me? Do I actually care if someone calls me doctor or not? Right? I have to think about that. And so it's really, that takes a lot of self-awareness. So in
Mm.
the workplace, you asked about the gap. The gap is
Yes.
because it depends on the context, and the context is constantly shifting. Here's another way that the context can change, or changing context can then change how we think about respect. So if you think about in an organization, I like to use the analogy of language. So think about an organization as a whole, and when you think about how the forms of respect that are going to be prioritized across that organization, I think of that as like the national language. Here are the top 2 to 3. These are the ones we really care about. So maybe we really care about acknowledgement when we're together. Yay, everyone's great. Yay, 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 right? But then you think in an organization, they have different departments. There's engineering, there's finance, there's marketing.
Yeah.
All of those have their different functions, they have different purpose, they have different leaders with their own personalities. And so the forms of respect that each of those leaders prioritize, I liken that to the regional dialects. And then there's me. I'm an individual who has my own preferences too. And so there we can go, and people who do the best in an organization, they can go to different teams. They're multilingual. And so it's about recognizing that it can shift rather than saying like, oh, they're being contradictory. It's like, no, the context has changed. And even when you think about an early stage company, to think about a 5-person startup versus 100,000 person company that's been around for 50 years, procedure is going to be way more important,
right,
than to a big established company than a startup. And that's okay. So it's also about being unapologetic about, hey, this is what we prioritize and this is what we don't. And Dr. Lola also say, I like to say prioritize instead of value. Because to value something, it's always, but to prioritize recognizes I value transparency and I value privacy. And I'm going to have to prioritize one or the other when I decide, do I publish everyone's pay or not?
Right. I like that. Yeah. And I love the context piece too, because I think I liken this also to individual responsibility when it comes to respect and growth. Because this is part of why we have this break in execution when people's levels change. So we talk about frontline managers, middle managers, leadership. Sometimes as people move through, the requirement is shifting, the context is shifting, right? You might have been used to just working within the constraint of a certain function, and now you get to a different role where there's a different requirement for that role. But most times people don't necessarily train you for that.
And they're not aware.
You're not aware, exactly.
You're not aware, and you're just, this worked for me before. Why won't it work now? Another thing, actually, to explain the gap, is people do what you do, not what you say. So people be respectful. Punctuality is important, but if the CEO is always late, then is punctuality actually important? Right? So just to be aware that what you do is what establishes the practice.
Yeah.
It's not what you say.
It's not what you say. Exactly. And I think intentionally defining or acknowledging that respect looks very different from everyone is a great start. It's a great way to start to bring this more into conscious awareness for people within your organizations. So some of the work that you do with companies, I guess that's where curiosity comes in. Curiosity based. So tell me about your organization. What do you do? How do you partner? What kind of work do you do?
So, for example, if we were to work with an organization and bring in 7 forms of respect to them, it might start with you work with ERGs, right? So we've come in when they have certain Asian American Pacific Islander month, and it's just, hey, let's talk about forms of respect. It could also be an introductory workshop, and it could also be a deep dive. So one of the ways I actually like to start is just to get people to reflect on to answer this question, who in your life and what experiences have influenced how you think about respect? And that gets people to recognize all of my past experiences and background have informed this. And so we belong to multiple communities, cultures, identities at the same time. And that informs how I think about respect, which is then helps me understand, well, if I have particular influences, then that means that my coworkers do too. And that's why we're showing up and clashing. And so just to get to that part and to reflect is a really good way to ease people in. I also like to ask, actually getting back to that curiosity part, is I will ask people, so curiosity is a practice. It has 3 elements: self-awareness, relationship building, and clear communication. So I'll ask people in polling, how do you think your colleagues are doing in these areas? How are you doing? And so one thing I often see is, oh, my colleagues don't listen, but I don't have that problem. And then what I do there is just, then we might talk about, well, what does it feel like to be listened to?
Mm-hmm.
Does it mean that, oh, I expressed my opinions and then people agreed to it? Does it mean that people acknowledged and asked me questions and engaged? What does that actually look like? So then we'll get more curious there. And then I also will ask people for, what are examples of respect and disrespect here? And I intentionally ask that in the same survey, because what one person's respect can look like another person's disrespect. Here's an example. I worked in the tech industry for a long time, and profanity is totally okay in the tech industry. You can drop these F-bombs and it's considered candor and being honest and being real, right?
Real.
And another place that's incredibly inappropriate. Mm-hmm. And then so people who are not used to that are just like, oh, there's so much profanity here. It feels so disrespectful. And others are like, oh yeah, we get to use profanity, right? And so it gets at that. I mean, I actually have this video where I do a one-woman show where I act out, hey, this is the same behavior can be interpreted differently. And so yes. And then we also do deep dives where we will really get it. What are the forms of respect that are currently being practiced? Why? And what should ideally be practiced? What do we need? And why? And what happens if we don't do that? And then to actually really break it down and spend a couple of months, we'll give teams exercises. If you want this is what it means. This is how you start to practice that, and to accept that each form is difficult. One that people often say they want is candor. Hey, let's give each other constructive feedback openly. That is hard work. It's hard work. I remember working with one team where the CEO was like, oh yeah, I believe in candor. I'm all about it. And then when we actually started to practice it, he couldn't do it. He could not say anything. He could not give constructive feedback to any of his reports. And yet he was like, oh, I'm all about it. So there's also the gap, Dr. Lola talking about gaps. There's the gap between what we think we give and what we actually give to. So it requires a lot of this work actually is about inward curiosity. It's about self-awareness, and then building what I like to do is surface that for people. Where are those gaps?
Yeah. And I think it's important work you're doing. I love the 2 lenses you're bringing in. It's first understanding what respect means, and then using curiosity as a tool for us to be better, for us to learn skills, be more aware. Because it's one thing to recognize the issue, but then what do I do next? So giving people the tools to actually work with people, and I'm looking forward to having you come join our ERG sessions, because I think that's definitely a space where we could also really bring this into our conversations first, and then potentially into our companies. So do you want to share a little bit more about the role curiosity plays as a bridge before we wrap this up with a few actionable insights for leaders? So when we talked a little bit about respect, which is kind of like that understanding, and a little of the deep dive that you help teams do, so understanding what respect is, what it is not, and the whole range of things in between. But a little bit more on the curiosity side of things. Why curiosity? How did you even bridge the 2 together?
So part of it is because of the way that people would first interpret this. I realize how much curiosity has to do, because they hear 7 forms of respect and they think, oh, you're going to tell me how to be respectful. And so it took quite a bit of work, and I realized, oh, I just have to explain this is about curiosity around respect. And so I tell people, It's okay if you look at these 7 forms and you say, none of them resonates with me. Nope. And I said, that's okay. So get curious. What does? Like, how do you want respect? Get curious about yourself. How do you want respect? You do not actually have to go with any of the 7 forms. And so even that breaking of, it's to actually ask yourself what matters to you. And that, I think that it's really about moving away from right or wrong. I think that's where we get in trouble. There are some things that are black and white. Like, there's a code of conduct. There are laws. I'm not saying if you assault someone, that is not disrespect. That is against the law, right? Don't do that. Don't bully someone. But there are many things that are in the gray. And that's where we really need to practice curiosity, slowing down and recognizing it's actually, there are many different ways to see this. So yeah, that's the bridge of just, oh, and I'll actually add one other thing is, and this is in my TEDx talk, when I first started
That's what
doing
I'm
this
actually
work.
putting in the chat right
Yeah,
now for anybody that is listening. Dr.
Yeah.
Julie Pham did a TED talk on curiosity as a practice, and I think it's one you want to listen to.
Yes.
I
And
enjoyed listening to it as well.
Thank you. And so when I started, I remember early days when I was working with my clients and I would give them a structure of how to approach a difficult conversation with curiosity. And especially if they felt disrespected. And I would hear people say, why do I have to ask questions? Because I would say, well, then you ask a question. Why do I have to ask questions? I know the answer. Like, I know why they did it, right? And I realized I needed to create a speed bump. And so I said, okay, before you ask questions, you need to ask yourself 2 questions. Before you enter this difficult conversation, the first question is, do I want this person to learn from me? Yeah, I want this person to learn from me. The second question is, am I willing to learn from this person? To slow down and ask myself that. And if I'm not ready, that's okay. Just don't enter the conversation, because we can actually hurt that relationship more if we're not ready. And we can all perform curiosity. We can all like lean in and listen and ask questions that interest us, but we're trying to guide the conversation a certain way. But to truly enter this, where am I willing to learn from someone else? That means, am I willing to change my mind? And if I cannot say yes to that, then I'm not ready. And that's okay. Go practice with someone else. Go talk to someone else.
Yeah. And I think that's where a lot of us will pause, right? And we say, oh, can this person learn from me? Yeah. We're always like, oh, yeah, I need to tell this person has a lot that I need them to listen to and hear right now. But when it comes to, am I willing to learn from them? That's usually harder. You are in a place where you're already like all set in some things that you think this person can learn. So I love that. And I love how you use the example of somebody close to you in your talk, because again, this is not even something that is limited to the workplace. This is something we can apply in our everyday interactions with people. And it's a practice, it's a muscle that we get comfortable with. We start using it in different interactions. So thank you for sharing that. All right. I put a link in the chat. If you're listening, check out Dr. Julie Pham's TED Talk on curiosity as a practice, and also the 7 forms of respect. If you're looking to bring any of these 2 in combination together into like a very insightful, applicable session for your teams, you want to talk to her. I think it's great stuff for teams, for individuals, for organizations to really focus on the right conversations with the right tools and that people can leverage in different parts of their lives. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Dr. Lola.
All right. Before we wrap up, any final thoughts as you think about the people listening now, whether they are individual contributors or people leaders? Any 1 or 2 tips that you would like them to walk away with that they can apply immediately?
Yes, I want to share the rubber band rule. So this is where, when we talk about respect, we often talk about the golden rule: treat people the way you want to be treated. But the problem is, what if they don't want to be treated the way you want to be treated? And so I have what I call the rubber band rule, and that is recognizing we all flex for people. Dr. Lola, I want to respect you, so I'm going to stretch for you. We're constantly stretching for other people because we want to be respectful. And the issue is, sometimes we do things that we don't actually like, and so we're stretching a lot. And sometimes we're stretching and stretching and stretching so much that we actually snap and break like a rubber band. And so the rubber band rule is about knowing what are my breaking points? What is going to make me snap? And that is different for everyone. I have to know that for myself. I have to have the self-respect, the self-awareness before I can expect other people to know. And it can change depending on the context, because I'm way more stretchy at home than I am at work, right? So just recognizing that the context matters. And the last thing I'll say there is oftentimes we're thinking about how much we stretch for other people, and we don't think about how they are also stretching for us.
Thank you. And I love that you talked about at home too, because I was thinking, I was like, do you do marriage stretching coaching?
Well, actually, that's right now, actually, we're working on the next book, and that's going to be respect in our personal lives, and particularly respect in friendships. So if any of your listeners want to be part of that research, please contact me. I'd love to chat with them.
I was going to say, how, you snap at home and everybody's like, what's she overreacting? Yeah, because I've been stretching.
I tend to be so stretchy that I only know my breaking points when I've snapped. And sometimes that's the only way we learn. So
Yep. And I think, just learning from those experiences, I'm like, I know I'm overreacting to this little thing, but it's because I'm at the tail end of my limits. And that's no fault of the other person if you didn't set your boundaries earlier on. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you for the work that you do. Really great to be in your network. I'm looking forward to collaborating again soon. And if anybody wants to reach you, what's the best way to reach you?
You can reach me on LinkedIn. Actually, I'm very active on LinkedIn, so just find me at Julie Pham, PhD. You can also go to our website at CuriosityBased.com.
Thank you, Dr. Julie, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks, everyone, for listening, for watching, and looking forward to hearing your feedback and any comments from this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.